What's going on, people? Welcome to a special episode of the Natty News Daily podcast. It's always special when Cliff Wilson joins in for the chat. And I am excited about this because I think the subject matter we're going to talk about is, for me as an athlete, interesting, for me as a coach, interesting. And as someone who works under Cliff, I think this will be very cool to see how he kind of operates within the realm of producing incredibly high level athletes because Cliff, you just hit an incredible milestone that can we say no one else has done?
I don't know. It's funny because I was
Can
talking
I say
to.
that and not dump it on you? I'm gonna say it
Oh,
right now.
all right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anyone else has done it.
So, Cliff, you just hit 200 pro cards under the Team Wilson umbrella here. Pete Fitchin, that's the 200th, right?
Yes, yeah. And funny enough, Pete Fitchin, I'm going to give him his props. Pete Fitchin has been a client of mine for 12 years now. Pete, somewhat recently, a few months back, hit 100 on his
Very
pro
cool.
card total,
There we
which
go.
I was like, yeah. And I don't even know a lot of guys that hit 100. So I want to give a shout out to Pete on that too.
Amazing. Amazing. So, Cliff, let's just dive right in. What what does it take to produce 200 pro cards as a coach? Let's start with the coach hat because you've been doing
Okay.
this a long time. You've worked with 200 people. Well, let's no, because multiple pro cards per person. You've worked with a lot of people and produced 200 professional athletes. What does that take on your end?
Um, First off, time. Um, it takes a lot of time. It took me about 15 years. I think I would have gotten a little bit faster if not for COVID. Damn you, COVID.
Yeah,
Yeah, but you know, I was kind of thinking about. I knew 200 was coming. I ended on 199 last year, so I had quite a winter to think about it. And it's like I got to thinking about some of the things that I've done that have been able to sustain certain levels because I think you've been around bodybuilding for a while now. Do you ever see people where they come out in the coaching game and they just kind of light the world on fire, and then it seems like I feel like 5 years is usually the cutoff point where they start to one of two things happen: they burn out and they just stop, or
sure.
switch directions, or the results don't hold up. And I think it's this combination of avoiding complacency from a coaching aspect. So I think there's like coaching process things, avoiding complacency, making sure to still give a lot to your clients when it is needed.
Yep.
And then maintaining standards because it's really easy to let standards erode. And I do remember even around the 5, 6 year mark, even with myself, I noticed, I wouldn't give long emails even when a client was sort of needing or asking for it.
Sure.
Or, and I was like, at the end of that year, I remember thinking, I could have done better,
Yep.
and I think that it's like so now I kind of put myself through this process of every year I audit myself where I'm like, what did I do well? And whatever I did well, I make sure at the point of emphasis to keep for the remaining year. And what didn't I do well, or what could I have done better or differently? And then I try to make that also a point of emphasis going into the next year. And I think if you do that, then you have this like sustained level of standards over the course of time. But
Yep.
I would say once again, from a coaching process, that's really my biggest thing is being able to make sure that you are actually improving year after year and you don't just become status quo.
What would you say has changed, let's say over the last 5 years? Is there anything you can pinpoint that you're like, yep, I wanted to fix that or improve upon it, and you can confidently say you do now different?
Yeah, yeah. I have been continually, probably over the last 10 years, going down the rabbit hole of different training techniques. And because when I first started coaching, I felt like my training was very formulaic, if that makes sense. Like really progressive overload focused, regardless of what phase of career someone was in.
Hmm.
And now I've kind of stepped outside the box, continually stepped outside the box with training. And you've been through some of those ideas
Yeah.
that I've thrown at you.
Yep.
And I think it's really allowed me to ensure that my clients keep growing even into year 10, 15, 20 of training. And just as an example, Pete Fitchin, you mentioned Pete Fitchin being the 200th pro card. Um, I didn't really have my hands on his training a few years back. He was kind of doing his own stuff and working with someone else, or various people actually, working with various people. And then he let me get my hands fully on his training over the last like 3 years. And he's been training 21 years, I believe. And we stepped on stage 5 pounds heavier this year. So
Crazy.
we put on about, after 20 years, we put on 5 pounds of muscle in about 3 years, which I was pretty proud of.
Totally.
And so, things like that have actually been probably one of the biggest difference makers to ensure that my clients are still producing even after year 10.
Yep. Yep. What do you can you give some examples of maybe some like trainings, like insights or whatever? Like obviously we got the app that's enclosed a lot of the details on your training styles, but like what would you say? So you mentioned progressive overload. Is there other things that you would say have kind of turned your head over the last couple of years?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like well, right now the low volume training is pretty popular. It's funny how things just come full circle. It's low volume and then it goes high volume and then low volume. We're kind of in the low volume phase of popularity at the moment. Um, and I would say that I've almost gone the opposite, where I just kind of continually push higher and higher volumes with people.
Yep.
Now, people are like, what is high volume training? How many sets per week? And honestly, it can be so different per person depending on their genetics and their lifestyle. But the short answer is, what's the highest you can recover from? Like, what's the
Yeah.
highest you can pause? And sometimes you're still recovering enough to grow, even if you don't feel great doing it. Like sometimes there's days where you're just absolutely beat, and you can go at least another few more weeks before you need to really take some time off.
Yep. Yep.
So that's been one thing. The other thing that I've really focused on is um, I think that there's a lot of value in learning. I changed my mindset from exercise of more of just an X's and O's on the paper type of mindset to where exercise is a skill based endeavor.
Hmm.
Um, Nobody would doubt. So what we draw on the paper, I always go back to basketball because I was a basketball player. But what we draw on the paper, the sets, the reps, that's the equivalent of a coach drawing up a play. But how are they performing those reps? That's the equivalent of how does the player shoot,
Sure.
right? Um, and so in game, which is in session for bodybuilders, I really started to much more analyze like how are you performing these movements? And I've come to believe that how they're performing these movements, like in terms of execution, setup, mental cues, intensity, those are, I mean, intensity is always a given, but still, one person's definition of intensity is not always accurate, right?
Yep.
And so I've gotten much deeper into particularly just sometimes just send a video, like let's just see what we have here. And sometimes you can catch so many things with that video analysis.
Yep. Yep. Cool. Yeah, yeah, that all makes sense. Okay, let's talk now athletes, because I think this is probably where most of the listens is going to come from.
Yeah.
Is an athlete that is, I want to turn pro next season. I want to turn pro, this, that, and the other. And I think what is super valuable for people is you laying out what you see in an athlete that will turn pro or that could
Yeah.
turn pro, because there's never guarantees, right? But if they stick it out long enough, odds continue to get in their favor. But like, what characteristics, what personalities, what mindset does an individual operate under that you can get your hands on and say, okay, I've got this ball of potential. What
Yeah.
what, what does that ball consist of?
I would say the first two that I want to begin with, because it's almost like there's like this cascading thing, where it's I need to see these first few things before I see the next few, and then when I see the next few, I need to. So sometimes I even call them like there's almost like filters to success.
Sure.
And if you fail to meet any of these filters, like you can sometimes get a long way, but then you'll fail to meet a certain filter. Um, and the first thing is I think we also need to kind of distinguish that getting a pro card is difficult. I read somebody did a survey some years back, and I can't remember who ran the survey, but the survey was something along the lines of it takes the average person about 8 to 10 years to achieve pro status. That's competing years, not even training years. And those are of the people that earn pro status. And let's be honest, most people that ever step on a bodybuilding stage will never become a pro. It's just the hard truth
Correct.
of the matter. It's not a
Correct.
given. Um, so the first things that I really need are self-awareness and personal responsibility. I need those two things first. Self-awareness because some people will say things like, I will do whatever it takes. And I hear that phrase so often, but then when it comes down to it, they won't do whatever it takes. You know what I mean? Like that's a lack. Some people they say that they're not disciplined, but I think it's a lack of self-awareness ultimately, because sometimes they'll push themselves too hard in some areas.
Mhm.
And then they don't want to push themselves. Like they're just fooling themselves into thinking they are willing to do whatever it takes. They don't have that self-awareness to realize like, I'm not really there yet. Um, or they fool themselves into, thinking that, I just need them to be aware in the moment, like, and even like I'll see some people where they almost push too hard at certain times. They just lack of self awareness. Where am I at in this process?
Yep.
And then I need personal responsibility, because some people, they hire a coach and they think, well, the hard part's done. I'm working with Cliff. He'll take care of it
Yeah.
all. I
Yeah.
don't
It's
have
it's an
my part.
automatic. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Or some people just, this is probably self-awareness and personal responsibility rolled into one, but there's some people that almost seem to have this idea that their success in this sport is their destiny. I think you know what I'm talking about.
You
It's
mean
like,
you mean we're not going to war every time we go in the gym, Cliff? What are you talking about?
yes, yeah. And I've had some people actually say these words to me, and they're like, they don't, we as coaches, we have this luxury of viewing hundreds of people's processes, right? So we see the commonalities of people that succeed and the commonalities of people that fail. And I feel like this, something to this effect is always said to me by the people that are really not even close to the level of pro card. And they're like, they'll say something like, I know I want to do something great. It just hasn't manifested yet. And I'm like, none of this manifests.
What are
Like
you talking about?
yeah, you create this. You have to forge it, and so this idea that it'll just come is so off. And so personal responsibility, like you have to really go out and get it and earn every second of it. Um,
Yep.
so those are kind of the first two that I want to see, but then it kind of cascades into these other things with like openness. I want to see them open. Like, a lot of people have this idea that they have an idea of what it takes to succeed. And it's almost like it's such an ill-informed idea of what it takes to succeed. They've watched too many Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman documentaries, and they think they need to go about the process in the exact same way that those two guys do or whatever. And so an openness that you might need to try. This might look different than you think it's going to look. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that with your clients as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I don't know if it's like a social media culture has kind of skewed people's perspectives on like what it looks like to achieve it, because I think people just see the glitz and the glamour of the shreds and the show day vlogs and this and all that and the other, right? And I think Will Tennyson last year with you probably would be a good person to talk to of like the being that famous on social media within our space and all the eyes on him to see him succeed and achieve, the WNBF card. But I'm sure he would be one to be like, this shit was hard, right? And
Yes.
it's not as pretty as that stage photo looks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and what's interesting? If we could just even talk about Will for a second, because I think he's something that a lot of listeners will, um, they saw him go through the process, and um, going back to the idea that this is a skill-based endeavor, and it's not just in the gym, but I actually, even if we're going to talk about something I've really adopted, it's just this, the whole process is skills, various skills. And when I work with somebody, I'm trying to plug in these skills and teach these skills all along the way, and which skill is the most pressing for them to learn. And, Will is a very first time competitor. And you saw this with Sam Sulik as well. But like, some people are like, why weren't there, Will had glutes, but they're not like rock hard glutes. You know what I mean? Like a seasoned competitor. And even things like, how do you, and I'm sure you've seen this too, there's a direct correlation between how rock hard, particularly upper thighs and glutes get. Um, when cortisol levels are high. It's almost impossible to get that rock hard look without cortisol levels being somewhat controlled.
Yep.
And that just rarely ever happens for a first time competitor because the ability to go through an entire prep and just stay calm in your head
Yep.
is such a skill. And it's not a skill that's usually ever had by a first time competitor. You know what I mean? And
No, for
so,
sure.
and it's one of those things where you can't really do it until you go through it. And so, even sometimes I've had Will gave it everything that he had, and he followed the diet, and he pushed himself, and he had the muscle mass to get it on the first time out. But to be honest, even someone that if Will were 8 pounds lighter in muscle tissue, he wouldn't have got it right. And so it's like sometimes people will be like, I'm going to get the pro card this first time out. And I'm like, you have things coming your way that you aren't even aware of yet. you know?
Yeah. It's interesting, like the the guys people can go into prep with underestimating it. You know what I mean? Which continues to blow my mind. And I've been doing this, last year was, my 10th season of competing or 10th decade of competing. Whoa, 10th year, a decade of competing.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I forget that I probably had these thoughts when I first started because it was so long ago. But when you hear people just really underappreciate, like, oh yeah, I got this, man. Like, I've been training for a couple years. Like, I think I've done a couple cuts here and there. I should be okay. And it's like, man, like, you wait, and then they're 10 weeks out, and they're like, dude, I'm beat. I'm like,
Yeah.
you
We
just
got a long way
wait,
to go.
just wait, or they get to like just under beach lean. You can get to beach lean pretty comfortably. But then they start getting under beach lean, and the discomfort, without a surprise, starts to creep in, right? And those check-ins turn into, yeah, man, like I was a little bit sluggish in the gym today. My energy's a bit lower in the afternoons. Like I'm starting to notice it, and I'm like, you still have plenty to go. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that, like we're talking about skills, right? Like to be able to then chew on that and swallow it and say like, okay, like here we go. And it's gonna only get harder, and you learn to manage it, but it is hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so hard. And the other thing that I think, so a thing that's even difficult when dealing with my clients is like they see I have, we have the Facebook group where, people will talk to each other. And also a lot of my clients just talk to each other because when I post something, they all friend each other. And I think that there gets to be this thing where it's like, after 200 pro cards and a lot of pro wins and stuff like that. And it's just, they sometimes don't know how to conceptualize winning in their head because like, they're like, anything less than a win is a failure. And I'm like, that's not even despite the fact that I've won a lot. Um, that's not how I think of this process at all. It's really a game of percentages and advantages. So, like, if you have 10 guys or girls stepping on a stage, it's not each one having a 10% chance of winning right out of the gate, right? Let's say they all decide some time ago to do the show. It's not 10%, 10% on the line. This
Yep.
person over here, they got good parents. They have a 40% chance right out of the gate. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So this person over here that has, maybe only a 10% chance compared to their 40%, right? Then it's okay, how many years have I been training? Have I been, maximizing a number of years of training? Well, maybe you just increased your odds to 15 based on your number of training. And did I diet perfectly, or near perfectly? Well, maybe I bumped it to 25%. And maybe I'm increasing my advantage each time I do these things correctly and I execute. Is the lighting right? Do the judges like my look?
Am I
That's
am I
something like,
handsome?
yes, yeah, do they like my look? And then you have to hope that this other person does not do all of those things.
Yep.
Because if this other person with their genetics being better than yours if they do all of the things you do, as much as I hate to say it, there's absolutely nothing you can do to beat them. You have to have a smarter plan, a more well executed plan, in hopes to make up for that genetic advantage. And so there have been times where at the end of the day, you have someone and you coach them and they look fantastic. And in your opinion, they did everything perfectly and the plan was perfect and somebody was just better. And it's like, we did as good as we could. That's a win. That's a win in my book. You know what I mean? We didn't get the pro card or whatever, but now you've definitely increased your odds. And placings are just data points. They go up, they go down, but the trend line should be going up.
Yeah.
And so the next time out, maybe you'll be that person with the advantage, and then it's your turn. Um, and so this really like win lose binary way of thinking, I don't like thinking of it that way because it's really just data points and our improving physique.
Yeah. That's a good little transition. So most people probably aren't going to win it the first time,
Yeah.
right? It's probably going to take them a minute. What do you see in those people? So last year, right, we missed the IFBB for me by a
Mm-hmm.
spot. Tyler Jones, you mentioned he's a three misses, right?
So yeah, three second places in a row.
3 second places. And I'm sure you could rhyme off many other names who have missed it and missed it multiple times. What do you see in the athlete that takes that loss on the chin to then move them forward? You know what I mean?
There's differing mentalities about this. Um some people have the energy to take that loss, that close loss, and kind of they're on a mission now. Um some people have that, right? If you can use anything to motivate yourself, then go for it. But I would say that is only going to work if you also have the ability to avoid burnout, like emotional burnout. Um, so it's a slippery slope because personally, I'm kind of one of those people where after I take a loss or I have a hard loss, I'm like on a mission. I'm fired up. I'm like, let's just go get this shit, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that works for some people. I think you're a little bit like that as well. Um, but for the majority of people, if they try to take that, I find that a lot of times they're going to have this like drop, right? Where they sometimes even after the first week or two, they'll feel fine. And then it's like, oh, like the big letting
Yeah.
the air out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, as anti, and it's funny because I tend to be more of the fiery, like, let's go get it type. Is there are, I would say the majority of people who handle it best is when they lose, they're like, oh, that sucked. Back to work. You know what I mean? Like they're not even fired up by it. They just get back to what they do. And if I could even like use an example, I think you may have seen my client. He competed some time ago, but Andy Southard,
Uh, sounds
really,
familiar.
really big muscular guy. He's a pro. He's been a pro for quite some time. I remember going into this is when IPE was still around, IPE Worlds. He wanted to do IPE Worlds, and we thought he had a really good shot at winning it, or at least contending. And we picked a modest size pro show. And to be honest with you, I was like, yeah, he's probably going to win this,
Yeah,
just because he's just that good.
sure.
And even backstage, we were like, yeah, he's probably going to win
Yeah,
this.
right.
We get out on stage and the lighting was really bad. Um, Andy's physique is like monstrous, but not pretty.
Sure.
And he's shredded. He's monstrous and shredded, but not pretty, like kind of blockier. The lighting was really bad, so you couldn't see how lean anyone was. And also the lighting really, really bad. It almost ended up becoming a silhouette contest, right?
Game over.
And so he took third to two people that he should not have,
Yeah.
realistically. And afterwards, he came off and he goes, a little embarrassing. Anyway, we'll just keep it moving. And he was just like, whatever. And on the way home, he was cracking jokes and he was like, we were just kind of like, it was no big deal. And then like 2 weeks later, he won Masters Worlds, beating both of the guys that beat him, actually. Both the guys that beat him, he was Masters. And then like a week after that, you know who Mishak is. He took second at IPE Worlds only to Mishak, and he only lost by 1 point. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, you just bounce back. I think that if you can use it to fuel you to keep going, awesome. But I think for most people, um, being able to just kind of like, no big deal, let's keep it moving. It's so much easier when you don't have to pick yourself up off the ground. It's just another thing. Um, and even like, I'm not sure if many of your listeners, we're getting up there in age now, but we'll remember, know who Marshall Johnson is.
If they
Um,
if they don't, they should.
Yeah, Marshall Johnson. Marshall Johnson, I remember, I mean, he's still competing and winning pro shows at like 63 now.
Yeah, yeah.
And Marshall Johnson, I remember in 2014, he won the lightweight world championships and then he lost in the overall only to Doug Miller. And I remember around that time, he was about 53, 54, and he was doing like 10 shows per year for 2, 3 years in a row. And I
Savage.
asked, I asked him, I was like, how are you doing so many shows in a row? So, this is great advice I got from him going on 12, 13 years ago now. Um, and I was like, how are you doing so many shows? And his look never got any worse. And he goes, I think my biggest secret is, besides just managing the diet, right, is I don't let myself get too up or too down. And I said, and he just said, and sometimes he would win shows and sometimes he would play fifth or not place and win again. And he goes, if I win a show, I say, well, that was great. Let's just keep it moving. If I do terrible, well, that sucked. Let's keep it moving. And he goes,
Hmm.
I'm just out here having a good time. And he goes, every time you come up, there's always a drop, and if you allow yourself to bank on winning, then you're going to drop. If you win, even if you win, it'll just be later. And he's like, and then if I never allow myself to get low, I don't have to pick myself up. I'm just steady. And it's something you wish you could instill into all your clients, but it takes a lot of time to kind of develop that mindset. Marshall's only done that after about 20 years competing.
Yeah. How do you communicate? Because I know we've had sprinkles of this over the years where a client is, Cliff, I want to win. Cliff, I'm going to win. We're going to win this. Let's get this. We got this. We're going to crush it. There's no guarantees. They
Yeah.
can't guarantee it. You can't guarantee it. Their spouse can't guarantee it. Nobody can guarantee. How do you navigate? Because I've taken a lot of tools from you within my clients, but still I kind of when that message comes through, I'm just like, okay, how do I
Yeah.
not
Because
say, you know, don't look at it that way, but also not take the wind out of their sails, you know? How do you navigate that? Because that's a tough one.
it's tough. It is tough because here's the thing is you and I know that's not healthy. And it's actually going to hurt them. And it probably is hurting them if they're already saying
I've
it.
been there. It hurts.
And yeah, and it's hurting their energy and their focus, Um, and the other thing is you can't constantly be like, lots of times they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. And little do they know, um, we want to win every bit as badly as they do, but we know what is within our control and what is not. So
Yeah.
I do a lot of nudging. I kind of discourage that talk. And one analogy I'll use is, yeah, I get it, but you're wasting energy with all of this thought of winning, right? I'll even say like this is a marathon. If I'm running a marathon, I don't need to be telling all the runners around me how I want to win and I'm going to win and I'm going to win. And
That's
I don't
good.
need to be I don't need to be thinking about me winning while I'm running the race. Run your race, focus on the pace and the steps in front of you, and say the person that is willing. I always say the person that is willing to ignore how bad they want to win and focus on the task at hand and only the task at hand. They're not talking about how bad they want to win. They're showing how bad they want. And that's the phrasing I use
Uh,
oftentimes.
that's a good little stamp. We got to get that up somewhere. What do you have you noticed any change in that mentality with social media? Because I imagine, I mean, shit, I can think when I first started, like Instagram wasn't even really a thing. I didn't know anybody else competing at my first one or two show. I had no clue unless they were at the same gym as me.
Yeah.
And you aren't getting these perfectly curated, filtered photos and this and that to kind of get in your head. It's just like you walk next to him, you'd be like, I could take him. And that's it. And then it's out of your thought. Have you noticed like that change in your clients over the last couple years with the mindset of winning or getting in their head or hey Cliff, I saw this guy on Instagram. Does he look better than me? Check him out. Like any of that?
Yeah, in fact, it's not just me, but I've actually talked to some other coaches, and I don't know. Hopefully, people won't mind me saying this, but it's the truth. When I first started coaching, I would say that the first 10 years I was coaching, maybe eight-ish, it seemed like young guys were the most they are unbothered, right? They were like, I'm just gonna go for it. I don't give a shit. I'm gonna go for it. You know what I mean? And they were like, put your head down and work. And it seemed like particularly the younger women, and particularly bikini and figure, were the most bothered by like comparisons, right? What they saw online and things like that.
Yeah.
They were the There's almost been a flip in my opinion in the last 6 years. Now young men are probably some of the most insecure groups that I work with, where it seems like the women have actually become more
Meh.
steeled. They're
They're
like I'm
stoic.
yeah they're like and I think it's almost like my guess is that women tended to compare themselves a little more readily in the early going, and then my assumption is that probably there were women that were like, you got to stop doing that, and then they've listened, and now the guys are like,
Yeah.
and I find like a lot of the things that I found with young women in the early days, I'm seeing with the young guys, like they don't want to put on body fat in the off season. Like they want to have abs all the time.
All the time.
And I'm like, not good for growth. It doesn't mean get fat, but it also means, like you got to
Yep.
put some body fat on.
Totally.
And I find that like young guys, they don't use this word, but they're incredibly anxious. I find that they are incredibly anxious. They want to know how many carbs they're going to be eating at the end. They want to know who's showing up. They're looking around to see who's going to compete at their shows. They're looking around to see, how do I measure up to this guy? And that is so much wasted energy. And in prep, wasted energy means you get flat. You look flat, you feel flat, you are flat, you lose muscle tissue, um, natural or enhanced, honestly. And it's just like my biggest challenge in coaching right now is how to reach young men, because they are deep in the rabbit hole of insecurity. And so, as you do a lot of, I mean, you do a lot of life coaching in bodybuilding coaching. And now my biggest challenge has been, how do I get these young guys feeling secure? And once again, interestingly enough, by the time now the younger women reach me, they already seem pretty secure. I don't have to do that. But I've used a lot of the tools now that I used with my younger uh, female clients in the early beginning. Now I'm doing with my young male clients. Is like, how do I get this to be how do I get them to be a secure person in themselves and their capabilities, so that we can stop this game of comparison?
Can you give any examples of what you might, break down with that person that they continue to badger you with like these minutia things? What are my carbs in the next 10 weeks? What am I going to do on peak week? You're like, dude, we're 8 months out. What are you talking about peak week right now? Like, because I see that, like, I can echo that. And I'm sure many coaches listening who work with that younger 18 to 26-year-old population, even first time competitors that are just that little bit older that use social media a lot, I think fall in that realm.
Yeah, so it's what worked for getting the young women back to baseline. Um, it's similar tactics with what I use with men, but men and women are different. And I find that the pleas of where we need to take things are slightly different. So, like when I was coaching younger women and I wanted them to stop comparing them to the other girls, I would say like I would preach enjoyment of the process. I would be like, you're robbing your own joy from this process.
Yeah.
And I would say like you're getting leaner than 99.9% of the world's population has ever gotten before. Stop comparing yourself and robbing yourself of the joy of this process, and stop comparing and like let's enjoy this. And and then I would end it with saying like you're going to do good things, but you just need to give it time. And oftentimes the people you're comparing yourself to are years ahead of you in this process. And I kind of give them like, you'll get there, but enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
With men, I tried that same approach, like kind of like it didn't seem to work.
What do you mean
I re
enjoy it? We're going to war.
Yeah, and so now I say be brave, you know, be brave. And you do use the word. I do use the word because they don't want to put that label on it. I go, you are anxious right now. They don't like to use that word. Men don't like to hear that they're being emotional or anxious. And I say you are anxious, and you're dressing it up as planning. Men are they don't like to hear this, but I think a significant portion of younger men, they're like, I'm just really scientifically minded and I'm a planner. But really it's anxiety calming. They're like, I want to plan so my anxiety can come down. They don't label it that way. But I need you to be brave and accept that you're not going to know everything in this process. And you need to be brave enough to still dive in with no guarantee that you are going to win, no guarantee that you're going to have all the answers, but you need to be brave enough to know that you'll be able to handle what comes. And I find that usually resonates with younger men because the other thing also is that I do find a lot of younger guys these days haven't been told they can actually achieve something. They haven't had anybody that's actually believed. And here's the thing is, I am in a privileged position these days with my coaching. I kind of get to handpick who I want to work with. And I don't work with people that I don't see something in mentally, physically, whatever. And
Hmm.
if I'm working with you, you better damn well believe not only do I believe in you, but I'm investing in you, right? And so, of course I believe in you, but you gotta be willing to lay it on the line too, just like I am.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned like, people not being told that, someone believes in them or whatever. One of the things that I've been conscious of saying a lot is I'm proud of you and I'm proud of how hard you're working and the effort you're putting in. Because I know for me, when I hear that from someone who I look up to, when you've said that to me, or someone else who I admire their opinion of not just me as a person, but maybe the efforts I'm putting into something, and they say, "Hey man, like I'm proud of you, you're killing it." Like that does me good. I get fired up from that, and I've
Yeah.
seen it firsthand with clients when they have a really good check-in, right? The week was nailed, everything moved forward, photos look good. I send them a little comparison from like 8 weeks ago to now. I'm like, I'm proud of you, man. Like you're taking this on and you're doing a good job with it, and that seems to really go far.
Yeah, yeah. And praise when they do good things too, because I just don't think a lot of people are used to that these days. And and the other thing too is also with guys, you're like, we're going to war. And I'm like, yeah, if we actually treated this like war, you wouldn't be behaving this way. You know what I mean? Like if it's like we're both in war here, all right? If we're going into a show, you're not going to lean over and be like, so do you think we're going to win? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, no,
Yeah.
hey Sarge, what happens if they shoot Jackson over here? What do I do then? Do you know what I mean? Like let's put on our game face. You know what I mean? Stop talking about winning and losing, and let's just get it done. Focus on what's in front of us.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. All right, let's go back a bit to kind of traits in long-term success, right? You've worked with me now for 7 years. You've worked with Tyler a long time. You've worked with Eddie a long time, Josh a long time. Like a lot of your people who see good success are in it for a minute. What do you think? Is it a love of the game? Is it continually setting goals? What is that for the people that you work with that you see that are like, hey man, we're probably gonna be doing this for a long time.
um, yeah, and even backpedaling to that question, backpedaling one step further, you're right. I get a lot of time with my people. I like I said, you and I several years, and Eddie, I think I've been working with him since maybe his second show. And Josh, Eddie won the world championships in WNBF this past year. Josh won the middleweight class and then took third in the overall. And I've been with Josh since I believe his second show. So a lot of years under our belt. And I will say this in terms of longevity of coaching, I talked about like continually bringing your effort and keeping that fire. I think one advantage I have is getting all the time to work with people, and you get so good at coaching people when you have that time. You figure every
Yeah.
year you find ways to improve. And at the end of the day, okay, you have to have tactics that they believe in, but they also have to know that you want this every bit as badly as they do. And one thing I always try to tell like younger coaches, I'm like, if your client gets even a hint that some other coach may want this more badly than you do, they're going to get on out of there. So as a side note with that, um, and from the client perspective, like what keeps them in it for a while, I do think you have to start with the foundation of enjoying the process to some degree.
Yep.
Um, does anybody like being hungry or dieting? No, I don't know if anybody does, but I think that at the very least, you have to start with the love of training. I have really seen people, even with unbelievable genetic gifts, if they tend to be the type of person that misses workouts when they're like mentally stressed, or usually they're going to fall on the side of using training as a stress reliever, and I need to act as their brakes rather than their gas.
I'm gonna put my hand up for that one.
Yeah, yeah. It's really hard as a coach to, because eventually I can't act as someone's gas pedal. If I'm continually having to push them along to do the things that they need to do, after a while I find that my voice will get drowned out, and and so they have to kind of start with some sort of foundational joy of the process, because that's the thing you have to fall back on at the end of the day, is there's something about this that you love. Um, and so then I can work with that, because, they love training. And then I kind of get to be like, do you want to try to do something special in this? Do you want to turn pro? Do you want to get a look that other people look at your physique and be like, wow, I
Damn.
want to do that one day. Yeah. And it doesn't even always mean winning a world championship or winning a pro show. Sometimes it just means building a physique that other people would be impressed by. That matters too. Even using myself as a perfect example, I'm not, I'm not like winning big pro shows or anything like that, but I still get people being like, man, I would love to have your conditioning or whatever. And so I need that, because that will keep you in the game.
Yeah.
And then it's like, beyond that, I need them to, like I said, I need that openness. And a lot of times I need that openness because the things I'm going to ask them to do are sometimes harder than what they would ask themselves to do, or anyone else would ask them to do. And so there has to be this joy of process in the process. One thing I always say is that somebody that doesn't um, begin with joy, and you need to be, like you said, you need to be in this game 10, 15 years before you really do anything special. And the entire 10 to 15 years, somebody that doesn't love it, they wake up every single day, because you have to do this every single day, and think of all the things they have to do.
Hmm.
And somebody who loves it, they, even after 10, 15 years, they think of all the things they get to do. And I can't coach that. You know what I mean? Like, I can't coach that difference. I can only lay out the blueprint. I can't change how it's viewed in your head.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the person that they start training because they want to be a bodybuilder, or the person that because they train, they're like, maybe I'll try this bodybuilding thing and see where it takes me, right? Because you've fallen in love with the gym far before you ever stepped on stage, right?
Yeah, and I don't I coach a little differently in terms of that, because like I know there's some people where they're like, Coach, I need some motivation today. Um, I don't do that. One thing I always say is like I'm not going to give you motivation. I'm here to help you find your motivations. And there have been a lot of people over the year. I'm like, do you like what you're doing? Do you like this? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, because you seem like you hate every second of it. And um, I try to get I try to get all of my clients to the realization, because sometimes they don't actively think it, but like the realization that I really love this. And then once they kind of really come to the terms with the fact I love this, then sometimes it's like there's a joy within of this doing it all. And then, or I try to get them to the point where they admit to themselves, I really don't like this. Because,
What am I doing?
yeah, honestly, because there are some people that go about this process and it's almost like someone, you think they have a gun to their head and someone's forcing them to do it. And I'm like, you're choosing this. And there have been clients where I've gotten them to that point and I'm like, you know, you may want to consider that there's something else out there that you could love and you could do that every day. And there've been probably over the years 10 to 15 people I've gotten to that point. And then at least half of them have emailed me a few years later and be like, you helped me make the best decision in my life. Like, I don't know why I was forcing myself. I was like, you can just be fit. You can go to the gym.
I love tennis.
Yeah, you can go to the gym 4 days a week and weight train and eat a normal amount of calories and feel good and all the time and do something else that you like. And it's just like, you know, find what you love and then throw yourself into that.
Yep, yep. No, it's funny how you get in this whole bodybuilding world and you forget that like you can also be normally fit, not extreme bodybuilding
Yeah,
fit.
yeah,
Because it's so when you've been doing it so long, you forget how normal people operate. I always tell people that I can't remember the last time I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I
yes,
I genuinely could not tell you the last time I've had three square meals a day. Like, you know what I mean? It just is
yeah,
so foreign to me, right? Talk about the gas pedal because that is one of my favorite analogies that you bring up in all podcasts, and I think it is so valuable. It's been so valuable for me. It's been so valuable for a good number of my clients that it's either I'm perfect or I'm a failure, and I have to be perfect 24/7, 365 forever, or I'm not going to build muscle. I'm not going to win a show ever again. I'm not going to turn pro if from day one to day 1,000 I'm not perfect. Talk about that because I think it's
yeah,
important.
yeah. The analogy I frequently use is I say like, you know, this is a race because it's long, but in race car driving, the person that wins the race is not the one that sticks his foot on the gas and then just leaves it there the entire time. Likewise, in a marathon, it's not the person that sprints out of the gate and just goes as fast as they can the whole time. Those people in those sports would be losers, and bodybuilding is no different. The person that puts their foot on the gas and leaves it there the whole time loses, like every single time. I actually there's a phrase that I there's a trait that I use in this. It's called titrating. And I apologize. I don't want to go too much down a philosophical side avenue here, but it's true. There's a I want my clients to be titrating. I want my athletes to be titrating. It's a trait that's typically it's a word. Titration is a word that's typically used in chemistry and medicine. It means continually measure and adjust the balance of. So if like you have a sick patient, you will titrate their medication to continually measure and adjust the balance of that medication based on how they're doing. I want people to do that with themselves. I want them to be titrating because I think there's a a plague in bodybuilding where everybody is angling to be the hardest worker in the room. And that is because effort is when I really think about this process, I'm like, what is effort, right? And what is effort? And a lot of people view effort almost like as a virtue, right? I work hard, therefore I am of high character. Um, I mean, to some degree, that's true, right? If you don't work hard, you're lazy, which isn't
Yep.
great.
Yep.
And if you work hard, you take some self pride. But what is effort? Also, it's a display of force. How much force is being applied to a given endeavor? And here's the thing: is if you are applying more force than an endeavor requires, there's a word for that, and it's wasteful. You are being wasteful. Um, I don't need my bodybuilders in the kitchen cooking chicken and being like, I'm suffering for my passion. You know what I mean? Like you don't need to be thinking about bodybuilding, doing these mundane things. That is wasteful. You're mentally exhausting yourself. Cook your chicken and talk to your wife or your girlfriend or call your mom on the phone or watch TV for God's sake or whatever. You know what I mean? Like let yourself relax because if you're like you know, just going through your day and you're cooking your chicken and it's like bodybuilding, bodybuilding. You're driving to work and it's bodybuilding, bodybuilding, bodybuilding. It's wasteful. It's absolutely wasteful. And then you get to the gym and you're mentally exhausted because you've been thinking about bodybuilding all day. And I want to encourage sufficient application of force to the endeavors and nothing more.
Yep.
That is the appropriate gas pedal. Same way, gas pedal, you put your foot on the gas and you apply sufficient gas to the race car to make sure that you are in a winning position. Nothing more.
Yep. Yep. I find that's changed for me too as I've kind of grown and life has changed with, family, with kids and this and that. Like I don't have the mental bandwidth to put into bodybuilding outside of the periods of my day that are dedicated to bodybuilding, right? Like
Yeah.
my training when I have my food and stuff like that. And I was listening to a podcast with an IFBB pro just the other day, and he was saying how he was getting so frustrated that someone wanted to talk to him at the gym because from the moment he woke up to the time he went to the gym, 2, 3 in the afternoon, every waking thought was for bodybuilding and for the gym and to make sure the workout was perfect and this and that. And he was so frustrated that someone to come and say hi to him. And I thought to myself, I'm like, man, that sounds terrible to be so frustrated that someone wants to come to you, likely because they're looking at you for inspiration or motivation, or they're like, wow, this guy's impressive, or God forbid they know you and just want to catch up real quick.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that sounds like a very unhealthy operating system to use.
Yeah. And, it's funny because other sports don't think like that. Um, like Kobe Bryant had a lot of business ventures outside of basketball, and he had a family and he was kind of like, he got more active after he retired, but he was still active in like, his kids' stuff like basketball,
Hmm.
and people don't question his determination. And Peyton Manning is showing up in Saturday Night Live and during his career, showing up on Saturday Night Live and, making commercials and owned a lot of businesses. And, he, all of these other sports figures have other endeavors. Michael Jordan made a movie during his career. And nobody questions these guys' determination, but for some reason, bodybuilders think I can't do anything but bodybuilding. I can't think about anything but bodybuilding. Like bodybuilders are misguided in that endeavor, and I think they need to look at other sports and how they treat their profession, and that's what this is. If you're serious about this, this is a profession. You can still do the things that you need to do. You know what? You eating that chicken and that rice and those vegetables, it will have the same impact as if you eat that chicken and rice and those vegetables. If you're sitting there like I'm suffering, but I'm doing what it takes. I'm a man on a mission. You can watch TV and not even think about bodybuilding while you eat that. And it's going to have the exact same impact and probably even better because you're not just
Yeah.
exhausting yourself in the process.
Yeah, your cortisol's chilling. You'll have
Yeah.
glutes come showtime. Why do you think that is? Why do you think bodybuilders have that weird little quirk of like what, are we just all insecure? That's got to be it, right?
Yeah. I started smiling because I was debating if I wanted to use, but uh, I love this sport. I love it, but there are a lot of mental issues that this sport attracts people with problems. Uh, and I find that the people that enter this sport, most of them, the majority of them, uh, are in a tough spot in their life and things feel out of control. And here's the sport that allows you to control damn near everything.
Everything. Sure.
Um, I'm insecure, so I need to get abs so I don't feel insecure anymore. Someone hurt me, or I've been hurt, and I'm going to get so strong nobody will ever hurt me again. I mean, this sport is just littered with these mentalities. Low self-esteem. If I get big muscles, I won't have low self-esteem. But everyone who's been in the sport for a long time knows that it doesn't work that way. But I will say this: there's opportunity in this sport something that starts off incredibly unhealthy because bodybuilding is a tool when you have all of these issues. It's absolutely a tool. Um, and it offers opportunity to actually show yourself that you are worth something and capable of something. I'm able to follow this grueling plan. Of course I can, you know, do this project at work. This is nothing compared to what I've done on a bodybuilding. Like there's opportunity to prove yourself to yourself.
Yep.
And I think that it does have the opportunity, if you allow it, to raise your self-esteem and actually prove to yourself that you are worth something and you don't need to be afraid and all of these things. But other people don't use it that way. It's, I'm going to distract myself from my problems and I'm going to focus on the wrong things. And they they don't they don't use it appropriately, and it becomes a more, they take a detrimental situation and then they make it even worse by ignoring it, burying their head in the bodybuilding sand.
Yep.
So I think that's the reason why. And bodybuilding creates great circumstances to allow you to prove yourself. Gosh, I cannot remember who said it. I cannot remember who said it, but one of my favorite quotes is um, circumstances, and I'm paraphrasing here, don't make the man; it introduces him to himself.
That's good.
Um, and I think bodybuilding has the ability to introduce you to yourself if you allow it.
There's this audio that, God, I can't remember where I heard it, and it kind of goes along the lines of, when I got into working out and getting to the gym, I was under the impression that getting big muscles would make me happy. And I look around and I see you, and you have bigger muscles than me, and you've got bigger muscles than that guy. And but you don't seem very happy either. So I'm just curious what size of muscles will make me happy, and it's something along those lines. And I think about that a lot because I think a lot of us in this sphere are under that impression of like, okay, when I get this big, when I win this show, when I turn pro, when I'm Cliff's 201st pro card, I'll be happy. And it's such a misguided thing, you know? When I think about last year for myself and, I go from winning a WMBF pro show, I was super happy. I was stoked. And then I don't win the show to get my IFBB pro card. I'm sure young me would have crumbled, in that moment. Right. But you just learn and evolve, and kind of like what we've talked about through this podcast is you kind of develop traits and characteristics that keep you moving forward and help you process those things. But I think a lot of people get kind of stuck in these like negative frames within bodybuilding, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that just a good reminder every once in a while that, like, once again you choose to do this, and once again there's opportunity to make yourself into a much stronger person, not just physically but mentally, and you can, and that kind of, like, I guess that brings it back to the whole pro card thing. Is that, gosh, I did it last year when Will Tennyson won his pro card, but I can't remember. There's something only like, I want to say somewhere in the range of, I don't remember off the top of my head, 8 to 15 people that I've coached out of the 200 won their pro card on their first time out. It's very rare. It's extremely rare. And for the majority of people, unless you are just really genetically elite or you've been training a really long time before ever stepping on a bodybuilding stage, um, for the majority of people, this is a journey. And you really have to embrace that idea. Like, this is a journey, and along the way, I'm going to pick up this, and I'm going to pick up that, and I'm going to improve this, and I'm going to improve that. And only once you've run this journey long enough and picked up enough skills along your journey, are you really worthy of that pro card. Everybody wants it, but not everybody's willing to be worthy of it.
Oof, that's a good way to close this out. Very good. Very good. Any last closing thoughts, man? Anything you want to last throw at the listeners?
No, no, I think the best thing I could say is that, the last thing I'll say is, it's funny, because I hit my 200th pro card, and I remember when I first started coaching, um, I didn't really have an idea of what my end result in this sport could be as a coach. I was kind of just focused on, I mean, honestly, I coached in the same way I preach bodybuilding. I kind of just focused on one foot in front of the other. It was this client stepping
Yep.
on stage this week and that client stepping on stage next week. And um, kind of funny. I have it literally on my desk right here. Only after about like a few years did I realize I was starting to accumulate a lot of wins. And I went back and I had them all saved because I had been taking pictures and stuff of like the winners. And I went back and I tallied. And at first I was like, it wasn't like something I was like keeping track of. I started with like a piece of paper, a folder that I just started notching wins on it, and it was like really informal. It was just like there's nothing. I was like, yeah, it just might be an interesting thing down the road, and it wasn't like I set my sights on some huge number. It was just one step at a time, and I think bodybuilding or coaching or whatever you're doing, it's just once again just focus on that next step and get the big picture out of your head. Only once it's all said and done can you look back at what you've done, and then you
Yep.
can be proud.
Awesome. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I'm sure a lot of people got really good takeaways from this. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, check out the app, tell them where to go.
Yeah, my Instagram they can find at CW Team Wilson, and then you're right. I do have my own app, the Raw Intensity app here on my shirt and on my hat. Um, I realize not everybody can afford a good coach, and I realized also that there are a million apps out there for people that just want to be fit and kind of in shape, but there's not a lot of apps for people that want to follow great training programs. And the app is literally programs that my winning athletes have followed to build the foundations of their championship physique. You can literally follow the programs that these champions have followed. World champions, pro winners, pro card winners. And that was kind of my goal is to make something affordable for people that want championship programs, not just generalized fitness.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And where can they find that? App Store, Google Store, all the good
You can,
things?
yeah, you can find the Raw Intensity app on the App Store or the Google Store, and it's also on my Instagram too. There.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right, people, if you guys enjoyed this episode with Cliff, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and we will see you guys in the next one.